My name's Fergus Sweeney. I'm Head of Division for Inspections, Pharmacovigilance and Scientific Committees Support here at EMA. And it's a great pleasure to welcome you all of you in the room, and I understand also people online listening in the outside world. So you're very welcome to this stakeholder meeting. It's an annual event and an important one because it brings together a very broad range of collaborators from patients, healthcare professionals, pharmaceutical industry, and others who are all active and contributing to the discussion and the development on pharmacovigilance. First of all, some housekeeping notes. You can see on the screens in front of you the various messages to assist you. A couple of things, coffee and all other breaks will be in the area outside of the room. But bear in mind that most of your badges will not open doors up and down in other parts. These doors will open, but if you go out into the elevator area and beyond, you won't be able to get back in unassisted. So please let somebody know, one of the team, if you are going out, so we can let you back in. And in particular at lunchtime, those who may want to go out for whatever reason, please let us know and we can pre-arrange a rendezvous time in the lobby so we can bring you back into the meeting for the afternoon session. In the event of a fire, there will be fire marshals from EMA who will assist you and direct us to the appropriate exits if we're asked to evacuate the building, but we need to listen to the messages from the loudspeakers giving us instructions. And I think that's all in those terms, but last and importantly, we do, I understand, have people listening on the phone across the web. Is that the case, Yolanta? We've got people online, yeah? Yes. So please use the microphone. If somebody's not using the microphone, you're probably not being heard very well inside the room, but you're definitely silent to the world if you're not using the microphone. And I would ask those who are online, if we're not speaking clearly, please shout up. And equally, if you want to say something during one of the discussions or ask a question, shout out. I can see hands waving inside the room, but not hands waving across the internet. So please do shout out. Don't feel you're interrupting if you need to ask something. So we are here. We have a good agenda. We have quite a number of years now, one can say, since the pharmacovigilance legislation was updated and since the PRAC was inaugurated, and many things still happening. In November, we have a further rollout of the Udrih vigilance, for instance. But most importantly, I would say next week we have the first public hearing. And this really highlights what I would like to reflect personally, that all these changes, both in the legislation, but also in the way we work and the way we engage, are about increasing our engagement with patients, with the public, building understanding. It's challenging. It changes all of our ways of thinking and working, puts people perhaps in always moving, like any challenge, beyond your immediate comfort zone. But it's a challenge we are very happy to embrace, but one where we need active dialogue to make sure that we're all moving in the best direction and doing it in the best way. It's I've like earlier in my career was an auditor and involved in inspections all the time here at EMA, and one of the lessons in teaching is that you have 2 ears and 2 eyes and 1 mouth, and we should use them in that proportion. We need to listen and we need to hear what people are saying, because we need to build trust. We need to be open and transparent about how we work so it builds public trust in what we're doing. We need to build understanding, build confidence, help people understand how we work, articulate why we make the decisions we do. And that creates empowerment, because if you trust and you have confidence and understanding, you're empowered to make good decisions about your healthcare. And that's really important. So I think trust, confidence, and empowerment are key things. And we really need to engage, to embrace the challenge, and to have a very active dialogue so that we can hear the issues. There are all sorts of points of view on many things, and we need to find the best way forward with all that. So I welcome you all here and have a really good day, but please be really active in the discussion. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Ulva Spooner, my co-chair from the Irish agency, HPRA, who will join me in co-chairing the meeting. Ulva.
Thank you, Fergus, and welcome everyone. It's great to have the opportunity to speak with everyone here today as we're reminded that our EU pharmacovigilance systems exist to serve the public, to promote and to protect public health. And we fully acknowledge, as Fergus says, that that's a global and a collaborative effort. It's a collective effort, and that's why a listening dimension to today's meeting is really important. At the core of our EU pharmacovigilance systems operations is the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee that meets here every month at PRAC. And a key priority for the PRAC has been enhancing the involvement of patients, and that is epitomised in the public hearing next week. But those of you who are actively involved in the system will know that the patient voice is integrated into all of our deliberations in every single meeting, and the extent of outreach is broader than that is symbolised in the public hearing, which is a clearly important milestone. I know June will speak further about that. But a priority for the PRAC more broadly has been to be externally facing, to engage with stakeholders, to be transparent, and a focus on collaboration has been at the core of the PRAC's work. And with that in mind, I can't think of any better person than Dr. Ray and June to speak about the first 5 years of operation of the PRAC and the collective effort towards collaboration in the best interests of EU citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ulva, and good morning, everyone. It really is a pleasure to be contributing to this opening session on building from 5 years of operation of the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee. And I'd really like to pay tribute to those inspiring words from Fergus and the scene setting from Ulva, because we are all here to deliver collectively. And for us at Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee, at the centre of the decision-making of the pharmacovigilance legislation, to be held to account for how we operate now and have operated over the last 5 years. And the fact that, as Fergus has just said, so many of our stakeholders are here today from the constituencies of patients, health professionals, industry, research, academia, is testament to the fact that we share this common goal to improve public health protection. So let's make the most of these precious hours together and to listen to one another and to have that dialogue that's so important to delivery. So over the last 5 years, the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee has amassed a lot of experience. And my challenge is to try and not just give you some numbers and some trends, but also to tell you the flavour of what we're doing with 1 or 2 examples and highlights. And so what I would like to do over the next half hour or so is touch on the journey, the challenges in beginning to establish the operation of the new systems, then to give you a flavour of how we've operated those systems and gained that experience, and then think about some of the achievements and the areas of current focus so that this afternoon Ulva will be able to take us forward and to look ahead. So I'll be trying to take you on that journey to where we are today. So to start with a little bit of scene setting, although 5 years may seem a long time, it's a long time for any new parent, actually Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee is still the new kid on the committee block compared with the 50 plus years of operation of the medicines regulatory framework and more than 2 decades of EMA. And in the time span, even of those 5 years, we're seeing enormous rapid change, the public expectations that will culminate next week when we get together here at EMA for a public hearing, the changing demographics, the elderly, polypharmacy, disease patterns, and the digital revolution. And in particular, we are seeing amazing new science and technology offering hope to those many patients for whom choices and options have been, we admit, rather limited. And so we also need to focus on what data we have as we bring a new medicine to market. And I just reflect briefly here of a Dutch study done when PrAC was just becoming established that confirmed what we suspected, that the clinical database when a new medicine becomes available is really rather limited, and indeed for an orphan medicine, very limited indeed, not much more than 400 patients. And so the uncertainties that PrAC is dealing with around rare, unidentified adverse reactions, long-term safety, special populations and at-risk groups are really very considerable. So how do we create that knowledge in a proactive way? We also know from studies in a number of member states, for example, Germany and the UK, that harms from medicines are a very significant cause of hospital admission. And indeed, more importantly, that a sizable proportion of those harms are preventable. So that is the public health challenge that we face at PrAC as we seek to manage risk. Here is the Commission starter for 10, if you like, the challenge of addressing that harm burden, calculated from studies such as the ones I've just shared, the rule of fives, 5% of hospital admissions, 5% of all hospital patients with an adverse drug reaction, and indeed, ADRs, the 5th most common cause of hospital death. This isn't news to anyone who's travelled the journey in our stakeholder meetings, but it is well worth remembering from time to time the very significant challenge that we have in trying to reduce that burden. So the legislative aims set the challenge in terms of clarity, proactivity, robustness and timeliness, inclusiveness, transparency and best use of resource. And where PrAC has really focused, and the areas I'll be discussing now, is in proactivity, proportionate safety monitoring, timely decision making, not paralysis by analysis, and that inclusiveness, so that decisions on safety are not imposed, they're owned by those that need to deliver them, all in a climate of high levels of transparency and openness. So, back to July, 5 years ago, it seemed a very tall order. And you can see, I think, the cautious optimism on the faces as they gathered to start the whole procedure and adopt some rules in terms of all aspects of risk management of the use of medicines. And that cautious optimism has carried the vast majority of those colleagues forward to where we are today. I share the slide, it's a familiar one, of PrAC membership in order to remind me to flag up the European Commission call for experts. So please, it's open until the end of September. Please think about those Commission-appointed experts with relevant expertise in clinical pharmacology, pharmacoepidemiology, and so forth, all listed in the legislation, and think who has got that expertise and that motivation to continue this journey with PrAC. And I would like to take the opportunity, I pre-warned Albert, of saying a special word about our patient representatives, Albert and Marco, and our health professional colleagues, Kirsten Meir and Raymond Anderson, who do so much, every meeting, every item, to keep the PrAC grounded in the realities. We're data-driven, we're science-focused, but we need to think about those realities of clinical care, the decisions that health professionals are making, and the patients too, who are empowered to make their decisions. So, to our 3 public health pillars, again, it's not news, but it will shape my talk. Proactivity in safety monitoring and planning, promptness in benefit risk action, and the word is action, and transparency in communication, which has really coloured the story so far. What we would like also to highlight is the holistic view of harms. In the past, when you hear from a regulator, it's been a story of definitions. What is an error? What is an adverse reaction? It doesn't matter. We will look holistically, whether it's related to the molecule, to the health professional in their clinical practice, or indeed to the patient who may not have the best possible information to inform their decision-making. So 57 meetings, 600 risk management plans a year and 600 past protocols in total, around 600 PSURs and 120 signals. What does it add up to do? Yes, a busy committee, should not forget the bit in the middle, which is the referrals, a busy committee. But just as we've heard about pillars, I think two of the main items you can see here, the twin props, if you like, are the risk management plan element, where we're forever looking to proactively generate new knowledge, and those PSURs, a vital component of life cycle benefit risk monitoring. So that is the landscape, and that is what PRAC has been doing over those 5 years. But what about the trend? You can see a trend of increasing workload year on year, around 1,200 items in 2013, up to about 1,800 in 2016. So that relentless increase, you can begin to understand why we need to focus on efficiency as well as effectiveness. Resources are not infinite, and we always need to prioritise our activities where we can add most value. And in terms of the specific items, year on year, this helpful slide tells you a bit more about where that increase is. And isn't it interesting how the periodic safety update reports, that humble item, is now centre stage for regularly checking benefit risk and ensuring that the information that we provide is as up-to-date and informative as possible. So very interesting to see the direction of travel with PSURs. And so turning to proactivity, and we're going to hear a lot more about signal detection later on from Georgi Genov, but I will just say, and Georgi knows, I call it the jewel in the crown, because if we can proactively detect signals from the population database of close on 600 million every month and share that knowledge, we are truly moving to real-time vigilance. So our SMART group, Smart by name and Smart by nature, jointly led by Georgi and Sabine, is constantly reviewing our tools and processes, our methodologies, and so forth. So we resolved at the beginning not to proliferate subgroups, but here we have a group that's at the very heart of what we do. And indeed, Fergus has already mentioned the importance of Udrih vigilance, over half of our signals being detected from this database. We know they can be detected earlier. And importantly, PRAC carefully considered the audit report and resolved unanimously that Udrih vigilance meets its functional requirements. And so that announcement back in the summer, the early summer, was really the starting gun for Udrih vigilance reaching its, not just its full functionality, but its coming of age as the centre, beating heart of what we do here. Now, this is a slide that many will remember because our colleague in the Commission, Helen Lee, flagged it up in a previous stakeholder meeting, but it does serve us well to remember that step up in patient reporting that came to us as soon as that message went out that all member states should have a system. And that step up is helping us so well to look more into the experiences, the day-to-day impact for patients of adverse drug reactions. So let's remember that step up and move forward from here with every evolution, in particular, the role of the public hearing in spreading the word that we're listening. And early on in the evolution of PRAC, a nice study by Alexandra Pacarario, who's now here, showed that signal detection isn't just for those important new medicines, it's there throughout the life cycle. A median age of drugs prompting signals, 12 years, that's quite something. And that long tail to the curve showing that pharmacovigilance should never sleep, not until a medicine is really in its dotage, perhaps at age 70, and perhaps not even then. So looking again at methodologies, PRAC engaged fully with the PROTECT IMI Innovative Medicines Initiative in order to be sure that the tools were optimal. And very importantly, for all colleagues from industry who've gone through similar processes of identifying the best tools, the resounding conclusion from PROTECT was that all the tools that use a disproportionality algorithm, pretty much achieve a similar overall performance. And that's well worth keeping in mind, the complementary nature of all those that undertake signal detection. And as we look to the full functionality of Udrih vigilance, let's not forget that other tools and other approaches in our networked system will also add value. Now, I know that Georgi will talk to you about some really interesting signals. I just thought I would highlight one: diabetes, a new class of products, case reports flagging up a signal for the SGLT2s for diabetic ketoacidosis, and something rather special that led to very prompt communication that these patients didn't have a high blood sugar, they were euglycemic, something that people really needed to know. So to show how a signal can, if you like, trigger very prompt communication to those that need to know, and then followed by robust updates to product information, this is a very nice example. And another example, I'll squeeze in one more, to do with medication error. Now, you might say, how often is PRAC devoting its mind to error? Maybe perhaps one item per month. There'll be one next week. Watch out for our agenda as it comes out on Monday. But think about insulin. We have to think about even the very earliest signal. If something is going on that might lead to very serious consequences for a diabetic patient. And so PRAC worked alongside this consideration to update GPG as the good practice guide. It's on this slide, and to see that this is just a step along the way, and every time we see an issue around the insulins, we're asking, does that addendum need some further work to ensure it's as good as may be? And indeed, the methodologies has taken PRAC into a whole new world of root cause analysis, failure mode and effects analysis, those tools that need to be adapted to the scenario that the signal is in. So I've focused on signal detection, but please hold some questions for later on when you hear the very latest of what's happening there. Very exciting. But let's turn to the safety referrals. Small in number, but very demanding of agenda time, and often the most complex and important decisions for all who use medicines. Like the Swiss Army knife, there's one for every scenario, a tool that fits the needs, and also the sharpest in our toolkit. So procedures have ranged across the toolkit, but you can see quite a preponderance of the Article 31, that tried and trusted tool, and indeed of the Article 20s started by the Commission, with only a relatively small proportion of the urgent union procedures. So we might ask, why is that? We're not quite seeing the urgencies that we thought we might 5 years ago. Is it indeed because those PSURs are getting the attention and the robust benefit risk that stops you needing urgent procedures? There's a hypothesis we might talk about. So, started referrals, you can see quite a glut when PRAC came into being, but towards 2016, a steadying of 5 to 7 a year, and perhaps that should represent the ongoing, if you like, surfacing of those issues for which a union procedure is necessary. And those finalised, again, tells the same story with the eye of faith, a steadying to what could be our irreducible minimum of the need to put all that machinery in place to work out a benefit-risk challenge. Let's talk about some of these challenges, and I'm going to highlight one of particular scientific challenge. You may have, if you're interested in the world of radiology, have followed 10 years of scientific debate about how and if there is accumulation of gadolinium used for the MRI scanning that's bread and butter to hospital practice. And so recently, the completion of a scientific review, a very challenging review, focused on the linear agents and their propensity for greater accumulation. And that scientific review's finished. We expect a commission decision in the coming couple of weeks. Next week at PRAC, we'll be looking at another challenging area, and it is patients who've been telling us about the persistence of disabling adverse effects with an important class of medicines, the fluoroquinolones. Now, how to weave that into the paradigm that says treat with the right antibiotic, treat early, and avoid resistance, etc. So here we are seeing people with long-term complaints and need to take very seriously what those patients are telling us and to be ready, not ready yet, but as this goes forward we will be, to review the benefit-risk balance for specific indications. So maybe to illustrate, do watch our highlights at the end of next week, how we will carefully tease apart this very important challenge where perceptions of the patients affected is going to be really important. And we've already highlighted what's happening next week. It's a focus on risk minimisation, a really important part of the regulatory armamentarium. But we need to constantly ask, is it working? And is the risk, in this case, of sodium valproate used in pregnancy being managed and minimised optimally? So we'll be listening to patients, industry, health professionals, and all of this in a climate of receptivity. And I would like to really pay tribute to Juan Garcia's team for enabling us to have this privilege of listening very actively next week. And it is an important step. It is a new era of openness. So prompt benefit risk action doesn't need a referral. And what we're saying is that the single PSUR is now well established, and we have a map to take it forward for further optimization. So that indeed is another example of collaboration. Very shortly, we'll be having a refresher training, not just for our pharmacovigilance teams throughout the EU, but hand in hand with those industry colleagues who need to make them work. And needing to make them work, as we always say, takes two to tango. It needs both sides of that assessment team to be providing the data that enables PRAC to make an optimal benefit-risk decision. So do watch out. It's again another big step forward which PRAC is supporting. You can see, as I've highlighted before, the steadily increasing, the rise of the PSUSA, and no doubt you'll also be aware that we have a granularity and periodicity advisory group that seeks to fine-tune and smooth the peaks so that we can optimally use the tool of the single assessment at a timing that's proportionate to risk. So are we optimizing that fully yet? No, not yet. But work is well underway. And if you haven't heard about that joint training, listen out for it. It may be possible to be engaged over the internet, if not space in the room. And you might think that PSURs have been, if you like, a rather humble part of what we do, but not so. And I highlight how we look at the best science. PRAC's increasingly using the tool of pharmacogenomics, and if there are new data when a PSUR is on the table, and that does happen quite steadily now, allopurinol recently, we then are able to fully ask, how can that tool optimize benefit risk? Here is one where 6-mercaptopurine used in children with acute lymphatic leukemia, having a good review, showed some data on this gene, NUDT15, with different ethnicity proportions, and the ability for a health professional to consider tailing the dose. So it's a very short summary of really quite an important step. And these children clearly are needing close to toxicity, but hemopoietic toxicity in this case will be very serious. So a review is an opportunity to provide that better information. So my key message is PSURs are a scientific assessment, a robust extraction of all available scientific data. And then to communication. So it was a big step moving into the world of transparency, publishing agendas. You'll see next week's agenda on Monday, the highlights at the end of the week, and as soon as they're adopted, the verbatim minutes. And one of the best things I heard was a health professional saying, I read all those minutes for my CPD. It is, as an easy read, a really deep insight to the current scientific benefit risk issues in Europe at the moment. So think about it, a really good way to keep your professional revalidation up to date. And I think if I can just perhaps maybe show, that was the generality. A specific one, just picked out of the blue. Here we have July's, the referrals, new advice about an MS treatment and the provisional measures, and a contraindication in France on valproate. So those headlines key you in straight away to all the news that you should know about. And I really do hope, I don't think I'll ask for a show of hands, that you just log on to those highlights every month, because that keeps you totally up to date, and then you can delve more deeply into what's actually the detail underpinning them. So where are we now in the closing part of the talk? Really like to say the pillars that we've said about proactivity, promptness of action and transparency are those in perpetuity. But now we have to refocus. The world has been changing, the opportunities are there. So supporting innovation, simplification and flexibility, collaboration and engagement. I think I can postulate is really from me, but I hope Ulva's not going to disagree, that these are the watchwords now as PRAC is currently working. And let me illustrate that just briefly. The first anniversary of the Priority Medicines Initiative, medicines with promise to meet needs that are not yet met. It doesn't sit easily in the same sentence as the PRAC. But yes, it does, because increasingly PRAC is there at the very beginning when a new medicine comes through with important promise but great uncertainties. So if you have a glance at that report, the 19 products that have had prime designation, you will see that PRAC is in there ready to support with designing the ongoing monitoring in real time as close as possible. And indeed, it was foreseen, you might remember this paper, I highlight it from the early days, that very early on, it was a twinkle in PRAC's eye that more safe and effective drugs could be made available through excellent planning, engagement and transparency, and not just rapid, streamlined assessment. And that's what we bring to the table. Risk management plans, as we've said, are a steady feature, and this slide nicely shows the breakdown, pre-authorization, the dark parts of the bars there. A substantial part of every meeting is a very broad discussion about medicines in the pre-authorization phase and how we can best plan ahead to create new knowledge, using all the resources, registries, for example, and so on. So a key element drawing very fully on the expertise of our members in pharmacoepidemiology and indeed the commission-appointed experts too. A couple of slides for you just to illustrate that we do gain a very great deal, not just from the imposed past protocols, but also the non-imposed. And the results from those really are very important to us, adding value as they come through to fruition, these studies. And so it wouldn't be right, we're talking a lot about collaboration today, to let you think that PRAC is the only kid on the block, maybe the newer one, but we rely absolutely on our work with CMDH for consistency and approaches across large classes of medicines, and for strategic development, including risk management planning, with our collaboration with CHMP. We are joined at the hip, and so it should be both within the agencies and here at EMA. So we've talked about what's going to happen next week and the high hopes we have of not just listening, but showing, demonstrating how the value of the public hearing will be incorporated in the outcome of the referral. And that's a big ask, but we're up for it, and it is going to be a really important exercise, not just in listening, as I say, but in demonstrating that those experiences, perspectives, and indeed proposals are woven into the outcome. And we need to understand more about tolerance of risk. It's a slide that colleague Xavier Kurtz kindly shared, but it just is a simple example with serious bowel disorders, inflammatory bowel disease, how a patient may have a different acceptance of risk depending on their patient journey, the severity of their condition, to their parent, or indeed to the health professional. We really need to understand more about risk acceptance. Indeed, listening can take many dimensions. As part of the Advance IMI project, colleagues at EMA, together with dialogue with PRAC, listened hard to what the world was saying about HPV vaccine. Now, you might say, how can we distill that? We already have grave doubts about the value of social media and how it can, perhaps not give us the right view of where our priorities should be. But having said that, these focused questions and weaving that into our own communication plans have been really important. What are colleagues, people, patients out there all worrying about? And I'm sorry about this, Fergus, but you are the star here, together with Enrica and Marie-Agnes, because it's a team effort to go out and to share. That was the PRAC assessment on the HPV vaccine, to be able to go out and talk with those that are concerned with the public. In this case, it was the Danish Parliament, but to be that voice of a scientific committee really addressing the questions that people have and addressing them successfully. International collaboration, again, is daily life for PRAC now. It seemed like a big step to begin with, but as of yesterday, a bilateral with the FDA on issues of current importance. We're thinking international. And PMDA, Health Canada are regularly at our meetings. Health Canada will join us next week. And it's all in the spirit of building on the best. The collaboration that we share is about the best possible outcomes. So to finish, this all leads to what a difference PRAC is making and the important strategy around impact. It's a multidisciplinary strategy with all stakeholders involved. And I think it was last year at the same occasion, Olva shared the ambition that we have. And it's very aspirational, not just to know whether the decisions, the actions make a difference in terms of public health, but do our systems as a whole deliver? It goes back, I think, to the very first stakeholder group when we met together and one colleague said, there's a lot more to do here, but how do you know it will all add up to public health value? So the PRAC work plan for last year is under review, this year now is under review, and we look ahead to our 2018 plan. But if colleagues wish and are interested, it's important that this journey is really subject to quite some critical appraisal as it goes forward. The first symposium last December, an international focus bringing together patients, health professionals, regulators, academia, actually shook the whole plan and helped it to settle into some rather more crisp and focused objectives around the framework for regulation, systematically looking at impact, the methodologies, which are very important, and what to do with the results, because that is the big question. Are we ready to respond? But let's keep that in mind, and if the 14th of November is a date that you're not otherwise engaged, I can highly recommend being part of this ongoing journey. Those that were present, and some colleagues in the room are, at the meeting last December, will recall one of the, in fact, an academic, saying very, very appropriately, this is a dialogue of the deaf. And this cannot be a dialogue of the deaf. We must be listening and speaking to one another and in that climate of trust. So I hope I've shown that in 5 years of operation, that PRAC is monitoring benefit risk throughout the product life cycle, taking decisions in a timely way, using all the data that we have at our disposal in an integrated and proportionate way, and listening to those views that Albert, Marco bring to the table, together with health professionals, Raymond and Kirsten, every month. It's a challenge, but it is happening, and we have a way to go, but I would say that progress so far tells us that together, yes, we can. And I would like to say an enormous thank you to all the members, the EMA colleagues who've given unstinting support, dedication, leadership to make sure that we got safely here today. But I think we said before at the first stakeholder meeting, the best is yet to come, and that really is our firm belief. Thank you very much, and very happy to take questions.
So thank you very, very much, June. That was really informative and inspiring. So please, any questions or observations? Yes, François.
Thank you very much for this presentation of 5 years of PRAC. There is one slide that you used to show, but you didn't show it this time, but which I think is extremely important to explain to the public the outcome of the analysis made by the PRAC, which is from all the signals that you analyze, how many of them for how many of them there is an amendment to the package leaflet, for how many of them there is another kind of action, and for how few of them there is a market withdrawal. So maybe this will be explained by someone else this afternoon, but I think today, because I think we don't use that information as much as we should. And we see clearly in the patient population, particularly for diseases like all the ones that are the object of a prime project, where many patients are reluctant to report adverse reactions, fearing that the outcome of their reports may be that the drug will not be could be withdrawn from the market. And this is something that maybe we underestimated in the surveys we make to understand why patients are not reporting as much as we hope they would do, because of that risk. And explaining finally the outcome of the PRAC assessments is an excellent information to them. No, it is not necessarily that the drug will be withdrawn. There are other actions that regulators can make.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Francois, really for highlighting this. And it is a key issue which my colleague Georgi Genov will address and give you the latest position on. So hang in there and you will have all that data. But you raise a really important insight that I can imagine regulatory colleagues in the room and listening will really reflect on, that if you had asked me why I think patients can be reluctant to report, I would have said because they don't know what happens to their report. It goes into a black hole, if you like, and there's nothing obvious. And one of the ambitions going forward, particularly with the new opportunities of mobile technology, is to give people feedback. I had not thought that there might be a reluctance because of fear of losing a medicine, which is an important, albeit needing perhaps attention to its benefit risk and its information, an important medicine. And if I could maybe ask in return, if there are more and better sources on patients' views, we should tap into them. Because with EMA leadership, there are ways to perhaps do a feature on website or some form of, we look at that last report from the European Commission, which is all the facts that you could want, and it's a very good read. It's on there, you can download it. But actually, to feed back to patients exactly the kind of data that Georgi is going to talk about, and perhaps dismiss some of the fears that may be rather long-held fears, I think, and again, to perhaps accompany it with some data on attrition, drug withdrawals. The whole thesis of PRAC's operation over these 5 years is to optimise benefit risk rather than to seek to restrict. But thank you.
Thank you. That really is a good and very thought-provoking issue which we clearly need to address. There's another hand up here on my right. Somebody, okay, go ahead.
Jin, is there one thing that you might change in the last 5 years? We've heard many good things. Is there something that you really would have changed if you could at the time? 2020 hindsight.
It's been a learning experience. Thank you for that. And I think one of the balancing acts is the commitment and wish to do a very rigorous job on everything has to be balanced against the reality. And to take a slightly complicated route to answer, once we're able to better measure outcomes, we'll be able to refocus so that we are putting our energy in a way that delivers the value, rather than perhaps the big hearts that we have seeking to do everything to the utmost precision and perhaps we might say administrative nicety. So we'll have to learn, I think, to be very prioritised.
Good morning. I'm Francesca Cattarin from the European Consumer Organization. Building on the intervention of François, I will have two comments or questions. The first is maybe we could explain with the slides that they were missing the work that Prague has been doing on Tuesday when there is the first public hearing, because at the meeting there will not be so many people for organizational issues, but it will be webcast, so I think it will be a good source of information for all the other patients that are following the meeting. And the second is an invitation that I think as consumer and patients organization we are always glad to remake, to reinforce the collaborations with us, because from the document that last year were presented by the European Commission, it was clear that the agencies tend to work more with doctors, organization of doctors, which is absolutely good, but maybe we can be an additional help for you for being in daily contact with the patients to explain what François has just pointed out. And then the question would be, I don't know if it's a point that will be touched this afternoon, but is because yesterday we had an update from Juan about the Brexit and the implications that this can have in the work of the agency. Is it also practice having these kind of discussions about the shortcomings, how cope with that? I'm not sure. I know that it's very, yesterday was quite sad to hear what's going on, but maybe we can take this opportunity to get also some update from you. Thanks.
Shall I start? Well, thank you very much. So we had three very nice and helpful questions there that I'm grateful to you for asking. It's always good to have a colleague who will articulate what's in everybody's minds. So your first one was around particularly the slides that will come in terms of what happens to a signal, and could they be helpful in preparing those that are attending or even speaking at the public hearing and preparing them. And I know that Juan will be talking about this, Dr. Juan Garcia, very soon. There has been a lot of preparatory work done, but clearly if you as Buke have an idea about what would be most helpful, this is not the only public hearing there will ever be. So let's continue to optimise.
Yeah, just to specify, I don't think that this kind of information will be useful for the people that will attend the meeting as participants, because I'm sure they already had lots of preparation, but really for people who are following the meeting, also just for information, because maybe they're not aware of the functioning of the committee. Because we are aware that there are some, let's say, grassroots consumers, let's say, that are generally interested only on the activities, so maybe it's rather for them than for the people who will actively contribute to the meeting.
Good. Well, we'll certainly, and I know colleagues will take that point away, and maybe we can elaborate a little bit afterwards. Now, your second point, again, extremely useful, was if regulatory agencies, competent authorities, tend to look to the health professional as their first, if you like, partner in terms of managing risk. You're saying that the patient organisations are extremely ready to rise to help and do more. I hope very much that key patient organisations are already very closely involved as new risks are detected and managed. But that is an offer. And sorry to go back to François again, but you might like to speak in a moment about, if you wish to, your idea that every patient organisation would have a go-to person on pharmacovigilance. So that's quite a new concept. Every industry colleague in the room has a qualified person, a QPPV, but should there be an equivalent of a very knowledgeable and connected person in every patient organisation? So that's one that maybe François will pick up and respond to you. But speaking from the regulatory side, we're feeling our way and gradually developing, and at national level, the EMA has a heritage of 20 years of building up a superb Patient and Consumer Health Working Party and Healthcare Professional Working Party. So that network is there. What I think you're saying is the national agencies should be better set up. And that's something I think heads of agencies and others could well profit from. So question number 3, again, talking about things that are in people's mind, is around the implications of the UK referendum result. And I will only say, and it's after 12 years in the European network in this area, and the aspirations we all share for optimising public health for EU citizens and patients, is that uninterrupted public health protection must be assured. And I'm very fortunate that my colleague, Dr. Ulva Spooner, is able to have those discussions without the sensitivity that you talked about then. We have obviously to bear in mind that medicines are international, that diseases don't live in national boundaries, well, not really, and that public health is a goal that profits from a population and a science approach. So those are really important goals, the vision that we have. And I thought when, if I can just finish, the question of missing slides came up, I was very aware that I didn't talk too much about simplification and efficiency. We have a small group that's working on that will need to be probably working together with the ancillary group on the Brexit planning. So yes, there are various things that are happening, but the goal is very clear and well articulated. And I don't know if Olga would like to speak a little more.
No, thanks, June, and thanks for the question. I'd only reiterate that it's an imperative that there is continuity of public health protection. So, this agency has responded to challenges in the past, and there is a cross-committee approach to ensuring that there is continuity of public health protection, and also importantly for marketing authorisation holders, continuity of service. So planning to safeguard that, to avoid a sharp cliff edge, irrespective, we can hope for the best whilst anticipating a less preferable outcome as another possibility, but to make plans that whatever the outcome is, that continuity of public health protection and continuity of service is assured. There's a cross-committee approach which is facilitated by EMA leadership, and there's also within PRAC, in the context of our work planning, and also the efficiency agenda that June has mentioned, and our prioritisation, of course, is informed by dialogue at fora such as the meeting we're having today, and that PRAC ancillary group feeds into the cross-committee discussions. At the cross-committee discussions, there's also representation from the Heads of Medicines Agency. So this is a network effort, as June says, to ensure continuity of public health protection and to recognise that pharmacovigilance is very much a global, international collaborative effort, and we have a lot of experience in collaborating internationally over decades.
Okay, thank you. One more question from anyone? Anybody online who wants to ask a question? Okay, I don't hear anything. So I think if we move on now, we have a slight adjustment to this morning's agenda. Juan Garcia has to attend to another urgent matter a bit later in the morning, so we're going to, Louise has kindly offered to swap places on the agenda with Juan, so Juan will speak first, because he won't be here for the final open discussion. We'll give a little time for questions and answers specific to Juan's presentation as well. So I'm really happy to invite Juan Garcia to take the floor to talk to us about public hearings. He's been leading our preparation here, and it'll be great to hear from him. Thank you.
Thank you, Fergus, very much, and good morning, everybody. So I will try to build very much on the excellent overview that June has given us, and we'll focus on what has kept the PRAC and also EMA busy in the last months in order to make the preparations for the first public hearing in Europe in medicines regulation. And I think it's very timely that we have had this discussion today, because I think actually the public hearing will be held next Tuesday. So it's already been almost 5 years since the adoption of the legislation, and I think it's finally now that we are going to be able to listen to the public openly in such a way. And I think reflecting very much, I think what we are came to the conclusion to say is that the public hearing is really giving us the opportunity to listen to the public and to be able to understand the PRAC, to understand more about what is the issue at stake and more about the understanding of how the public is having their concerns, their contributions, or their views about the matter which is being discussed. But also it's not for the regulators to listen. I think it's very much for an opportunity for different stakeholders group, maybe to have a platform where they can listen to each other. And we hope that really gives also a value. It's not only us listening patients that we do, or healthcare professionals, but it's also maybe healthcare professionals to listen to other patients, or even some patients listening to other organizations and maybe share different points of view. And then it's also a great opportunity to really show what we have been advocating in the last years, that we want really a system which is open, which is transparent, and which is really engaging with the public. So hopefully this is another proof of it. So the key principles of the public hearing is that we look at it, the legislation allows the PRAC to look at it in the context of a safety referral. And we invite the public to give their views, but I think we need to have some kind of a structure. We cannot do it such an open way, in the sense that we need to focus and to define some questions that the practice would specifically would like to get from the public. And I think any member of the public, based on this, is open to express their interest to attend. But we basically use these questions to try to focus the selection of participants in case we get more people wanting to come that we can accommodate. And I think we have to say that the public hearing, again, it culminates a lot of work in terms of opening to the public, but I think it's not the only tool we have. We have for a long time been involving patients and healthcare professionals in all our core activities. I think we can say that patients and healthcare professionals are now involved in most of the activities of the agency. So a public hearing is not suddenly opening to patients and them, but it's just another tool which was maybe necessary to fill the gap on all the available tools for that. The objective of the hearings, again, then, is to increase transparency. So we open the scientific evaluation fully in the middle of it. We give the patients a voice while the assessment is ongoing, not a posteriori, while we can really take action of what they have to say. We want really to engage them. And I think most importantly, we hope that this is not, we don't want this to be a public relations exercise. We want that it really adds value and help us ensuring that whatever measures and outcome we have, it's improved by their contribution. And all this is building upon having trust, and that society trusts what we are doing to ensure that the medicines are safe. So the PRAC considers now systematically at the beginning of any safety referrals whether there is a need or not to have a hearing. The PRAC considers systematically the feasibility in terms of the timelines, depending on the urgency of the matter, the nature of the extent of the safety concern, but also in the context of the medicine and the available alternatives and the therapeutic effect. We also take into account the potential impact that the regulatory actions at the end of the procedure may have on the patients. And then we also look at the level of interest to really, based on these 5 criteria, to decide whether there is a need or not to have a public hearing. They are conducted in English, as most of the activities, as every activity that we do in the agency, but for the first time we are trying to open up at European level. We are offering the possibility to use translations during the hearing, which allows people not English speakers to contribute, but also to be heard as well in other countries and in other languages. So as you know, Valproate has been chosen as the first ongoing referral for which we will have the hearing. And I think going to this criteria that I said before, this is a little bit the summary of the PRAC evaluation. The PRAC consider that it was possible to hold this hearing according to the timelines that we were considering, that there is, as June said before, a high risk of developmental disorders in the children which are exposed in utero, which is quite high, and that there is a lot of regulatory efforts to reduce this risk. So we expect that this outcome, this evaluation, will result in changes and strengthenings of the current measures in place. But before coming with these update measures, we want to really listen what the patients, what the carers, what the victims have to tell us, and that this can fit the PRAC assessment fully. We don't want to take any decision without first listening all what they have to tell us. And I think we can also demonstrate that there is a lot of interest on this. We have a previous referral, and we have been contacted by patient organizations. We have already contact with them. We have already engaged in different meetings, so we know there is an interest, there is a real concern. And also there has been media reporting all along the time. Trying to remain transparent, as soon as the PRAC decided that they were keen to have a hearing on valproate, even at the very beginning of the assessment, we immediately went public, and we already told that the PRAC, while the review is ongoing, have decided to hold a hearing. So in terms of organizations, we made the announcement, and I guess you had already seen information that we have developed. We tried to really put a lot of effort on this. We wanted to try to produce material which was more engaging, trying to get rid of all the regulatory jargon and maybe appeal that somehow we have, focusing on the public. These are the three questions that the PRAC came up with in order to focus the discussion. We want to know the opinion of the patients and the healthcare professionals about the risk of having valproate. We want to know what they think about the measures that they are in place at the moment. I want to know what are their suggestions. What else can we do to make these measures more efficient? At the same time, we produce a summary of the concerns, and the summary is what you can see, just a single page, trying to make it very simple, so that anyone, independently of the level of health literacy, can understand what the issue at stake is. Everyone who wants to come has to apply, have to fill in an application form, and there was a deadline, even if we were a bit flexible, but we produce at the same time a guidance for participants, trying to use the same identity. And I think the efforts in this guidance is that, again, we wanted to get rid of all regulatory jargon. We tested with patients who had nothing to do with the agency, we had no knowledge of us, so that they could tell us they understand what we are saying here. We don't talk, for example, about the PRAC, we talk about safety committee, etc., trying to really tone down the way that we are usually working and the way that we are usually operating and talking. We produce a video that we will try to share with you. Maybe you have seen it, but just so that totally up to date. We produce information on the web page. We use Twitter, because at the end of Twitter, social media is the way that patients communicate nowadays, and everybody communicates nowadays, so really to try to be visible to them and to ensure that everyone who is concerned with the issue could know that there is this hearing and offering opportunity to participate. We went back to the organizations and healthcare professionals and patients that we are aware of. We went to the contacts, all the families and individuals that we have any knowledge of. We tried to to identify organizations through the Pharmacovigilance system internally in the European Union. We use, again, Twitter and media outreach. We use the early notification system, which is the system we use to coordinate safety information within the network. And we asked member states and national competent authorities to disseminate this message that the hearing was taking place in their countries, aiming to capture the attention of patients in the different EU member states. This is some of the material who went to the website as well. And I think one of the most critical elements has been preparation. I will try to go quickly how we have done it. And I think the most challenge is how to choose the request for participation. And I think we need to decide on speakers and observers. And at the same time, we want to ensure that the main contributions are visible and can be heard, but we need to also ensure that the different groups are properly represented. We did a dry run. We have done a lot of exploratory work. And I think ideally we couldn't go beyond 12, 16 speakers. Otherwise, it would be in practical terms and manageable. The capacity that we have is 100, and this is a limitation, but this is what we can allocate in the room. And I think we will have to play with these figures depending on the level of interest that we have on the applications. So in order to select, what we can tell is that all the applications we got, we are really grateful because they are really very focused contributions, which are very constructive on what we can see. And we try to select them based on the relevance to the PRAC questions, to the 3 questions of the PRAC agreed. And also we try to balance. So we look at the content of the contributions, we look at the affiliation, so that in a way when there are some speaker requests which are talking on behalf of organizations, we try to balance as much as possible all existing organizations. We also look at the disciplines and we try to again, to give good balance here. Importantly, we look at geographical distribution. This is a European public hearing, and what we don't want to run the risk is that it becomes dominated by a single country. So what we have received is 84 applications, and now it's closed for applicants, so this is what we will have next week. And it is mainly dominated by United Kingdom, but I think we have a very good representations from other places, and I think we can say it can go global in the sense that we even have participants from the US, from Israel, and I think geographically in terms of European Union, we have France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Switzerland, even out of the EU. So I think it's overall a good representation. In terms of a speaker requests, we got 32. And 32, of course, is not manageable, according to what we have said, where the maximum we could like to have is 16. So what we have tried is a lot of work with them in order to try to see whether they were willing to group some of the interventions. So we came up with 16 speaker slots, where some of them are going to speak on behalf of a group of speakers. And this has been very good, where they somehow have a very or similar contribution. It's difficult to say similar because you cannot really say similar, but whether it was possible to group them. And I think in this respect, we will maximize as much as possible the possibility for everybody to speak. But we have to also acknowledge that, for example, the 6-7 contributions that has been refused to speak, they were really valuable. And the feedback important is that this will be circulated in writing to all PRAC members before the hearing. They will be here present as well. And I think their contribution will be equally valuable, equally fit in the assessment. This will be fully acknowledged and will be also published after the hearing so that it's at the same level as any other speaker. But unfortunately, there are some limitations in terms of time. In terms of who they are, I think it's very good balance, and we will have, out of these 16 speaker slots, we will have 7 for patients, representatives, carers, and families, 7 for healthcare professionals and academia, and 1 for a pharmaceutical company. So I think it's very good balance in that sense. These are the countries of origin for them, so you can see again, we could try to group more representations for United Kingdom, again, offering the possibility to give as much as possible a good geographical representation. The number of observers is as you can see. And in terms of how it will be run, the duration will be from 12:45 to 6 o'clock. It's a long session, and we will have a very short introduction because I think the focus is to listen to them, to the public, and a very short overview of the referral and how it's going to be operated in terms of rules. But basically the time that we are proposing to allocate to each speaker is 7 minutes, and the idea is that we cannot be flexible on that. Unfortunately, it's a limitation to be a little bit driven and ruled by time, but it's the only way that we can guarantee that everyone can speak. So we have put a lot of emphasis on, and we have been in contact with the speakers in advance to let them know that they need to really try to adhere to that, because otherwise it's not possible to manage. We will have patients first as the hearing is initiated, and then we will go for a coffee break. we will continue with the company, and then we will continue with the patient, with the healthcare professionals and academia. Ideally, at the end, there is a possibility, depending on time, for some questions, because the way it is conducted, that we are listening to the public, we are listening to them, but we are not engaging in discussions with them at this stage. But however, at the end, if there is some time, there might be some questions, but the objective is that we can try to wrap up and to summarize the interventions and to let them know what's the next steps in the process. The next steps is, well, as you know, the broadcast will be available online for those who are not able to participate. And from here, of course, we encourage you as much as possible to follow it. And the next step basically is that there will be a summary that we will try to work as quick as possible to have it available in the public domain as soon as possible, and which will be integrated and will be, again, helping to finalize the assessment and the assessment report. And what we hope is that after all these preparations, we are able to acknowledge that there is a real value in what we hope to listen next Tuesday. So as a way of a conclusion, I think we can agree that this is a milestone in EU in terms of the way we regulate medicines. It's a major step to openness and transparency. And what we are really willing to is to make it valuable for us, for regulators, for the assessment, but we hope it's also valuable for them as well. And we will try as much as possible to try to quantify that. And we are already designing a lessons learned and impact assessment so that we can, by the end of the year, be able to hopefully demonstrate why we think this is really a valuable exercise and that all the efforts that we have put are worth it. And it will be a pleasure to share this with you in this forum. So before, I think we can go for the video, it's just you want to see, but I would like to thank you very much to June, Olva, and the PRAC for the enthusiasm and really the commitment that they have put and the collaboration in putting this into place. And also to all the patients and healthcare professionals who are here, who has been constantly updated on the preparation. They have given a lot of comments who have taken into account. And I think that that's the way that we think at the agency we have to do things. So thank you very much. And I mean, after the video, I'm happy to answer any question.
The European Medicines Agency evaluates, supervises and monitors the safety of medicines in the EU. The agency is interested in hearing the views of EU citizens when it assesses the safety of medicines. EMA's Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee, or PRAC, can organise public hearings as part of safety reviews of medicines.
Public hearings are a new tool that allows the European Medicines Agency to further engage with European citizens on the supervision of medicines.
By opening up the evaluation process and engaging in dialogue, this allows for the public to have confidence in the transparency of the decision-making process. More importantly, it allows the PRAC to gain the benefit of views and perspectives to allow a more robust decision at the end of the process. Public hearings are open to all EU citizens. They're announced on EMA's website, together with a list of questions on which the PRAC wants to hear from the participants in the public hearing and information on how to take part. So, what do participants need to know in advance? The first step is to register as a speaker or as an observer. The agency tries to accommodate all speaker requests. As time and space are limited, not everybody will be able to participate in person. However, EMA will ensure that it gives a voice to the widest possible range of views. Those who are accepted to speak are included in a list and given a slot on the agenda. Public hearings will be broadcast live via the agency's website. On the day of the hearing, participants are expected to arrive at EMA in good time and go through accreditation and security. They're then shown to the room where the public hearing takes place.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's public hearing on public understanding.
Once the chair has opened the session, one of the PRAC members presents the safety issues at stake. The floor is then given to the different speakers, who are asked to introduce themselves and answer the questions. Speakers will know in advance how much time they have to make their intervention. Once all speakers have presented, the chair summarises the views presented and explains the next steps.
In terms All the information gained during a public hearing is used to enrich the scientific assessment with new perspectives, views and thinking, so that the final conclusions reached by PRAC benefit enormously from this broader view.
Your opinion matters. We look forward to your participation.
So thank you very much, Juan, and to all your colleagues and team for making this possible. Please, questions for Juan, because as I said, he'll have to leave after this. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name's Jamie from the PGU, representing community pharmacists. Excuse me, community pharmacist. That wasn't an ADR. That was just something in my throat. Just a quick question about the participants. Do you have many journalists registered?
Yes, we do have journalists. I think it's changing all the time, but we have 4, and I think yesterday we received a cancellation, so the last number is 3. But they will be here. They will be in the room, and they are not allowed to interview participants, but they will be listening everything, and they will be reporting afterwards.
Senior scholar representing FPA. So first of all, thanks a lot for a nice introduction, and I think this is something that we all are very eagerly waiting for, to hear the first public hearing. It's going to be very interesting, and it's a very good initiative to increase transparency of decision making and also to allow public to participate in the assessment of risks and so forth. Jamie actually stole my question. I was also interested a little bit on the media presence in the public hearings, and perhaps you can elaborate a bit more. So there will be journalists, but are they then, is it open for them to write whatever they want? Will EMA have the possibility to scrutinize what comes out, or you will not have any
I mean, the principle behind is that everyone can participate. So we cannot really make any restrictions. So even we receive requests afterwards from legal firms, but unfortunately it was too late to the deadline, so we couldn't accommodate. But anyone can come to the hearing, and there is no restriction to the way that what they can do afterwards, and there will not be any scrutiny of what they are writing. The only thing is that for data protection, we cannot allow participants to film or to record or to interview any participant. And this applies to media as well. But afterwards, based on the hearing itself and based on their experience, they will be free to write and to report without any kind of restriction from our side.
Thank you, Han. Other, please.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm Jana Hlaváčová from the EMSP, and I want to ask you whether you evaluate somehow or monitor the input or the impact that the public hearings have on the final conclusions.
I think this will be one of the key questions again, and I think we have built on the experience that, as I said in the past, we never had a public hearing, but we have involved patients and healthcare professionals through various ways during the assessment. And I think we can conclude that patients and healthcare professionals always add somehow to the whole assessment. So I don't think so there is any doubt about that. And so with this new tool, with the public hearing, I think we are even opening more. And we are just allowing a vast participation and allowing even for more contributions without any kind of restriction. In another involvement, we maybe try to specifically ask different questions which are in the context of the evaluation. Here, I think we are more open and we are just listening to what they have to say. So hopefully, yes, and I don't think so it will be a surprise, because every time that we involve patients, whether it's in scientific advisory groups, whether it's in stakeholder meetings, they always add value.
You mentioned that this will be live webcasted, and so it will be audio only, because you mentioned you can't film the participants. Is this correct?
Nobody can film, but they have given the permission to be. So yes. It will
so
be
they will be filmed?
Yes.
Okay, and then they can be used for the journalists, or it's on the website and afterwards
It will be broadcast live, but it will remain in the website afterwards, so you can even come. And I think there is technically a possibility, if you come later, to start seeing from the very beginning. So it will be available there and can be used by anyone. It's public information.
Castellanke Traxler, ASCP. I think it's also a very good initiative, and we're also very much looking forward to looking at it. With that regard, will the broadcast be recorded? Will it be viewable after the public hearing or only live?
You can see afterwards at any time.
I don't see any more hands in the room for now. Obviously, this can be more discussion during the day, and I think also we will learn from the experience as well, please.
One final question for me. You have mentioned 59 observers. Are the observers also split like the speakers, that you have healthcare professionals, patients, or is just observer?
I don't have the accurate numbers, but they are very well balanced. The balance is equally similar.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'd ask if there's anybody online who wants to say anything. I don't know, Yolanta, if there's any hands up there. No, okay. So thank you very much, Juan. Sorry you won't be able to join us later, but that's really been an important contribution to the meeting with this new initiative. The next presentation then is from Louise Loughlin from the UK Medicines Agency, the MHRA, and Louise is going to present to us on very important initiatives that have been taking place under a joint action called SCOPE. So please, Louise, go ahead.
Thank you very much for having me here today to talk about the strengthening collaborations for operating pharmacovigilance in Europe, joint action, better known as SCOPE. I had the privilege of working as a project manager on the joint action. I know that some of you will be familiar with SCOPE, some of you very familiar indeed, but others of you here might not be so familiar. So I wanted to, first of all, go over the aims and objectives of the joint action, and then majority of the presentation will look at the SCOPE achievements and the highlights, and then I'll look on a little bit about the SCOPE outreach and how we can build on and maximise what we've achieved through SCOPE already. So for those of you who are a bit less familiar with the SCOPE joint action, it was set up to maximise effective implementation of the EU pharmacovigilance legislation, to help enable coordinated pharmacovigilance operations in the network and make best use of work sharing and resources, and to help ensure a consistent approach across the member states in identifying and managing risks relating to medicines. The joint action was launched back on 18th of November in 2013, when the formal award decision was adopted by the Commission, and it was granted the maximum level and largest contribution of 70% funding for exceptional utility, and the remaining 30% of funding came from the national competent authorities. And again here, the aim was to share expertise and best practice, deliver practical tools and guidance, and better operate pharmacovigilance in Europe. This slide here shows the governance structure, and I wasn't intending to go through it in any great detail, but the main objective of the slide is to show you how the project was structured. With the red boxes, you can see the different work areas that we focused on. So the first one was adverse drug reaction collection, which was led by Croatia. The second one was on signal management, which was led by the Netherlands. The third area was risk communications, which was led by Spain. The fourth area was quality management systems, which was led by Hungary. And then finally, we had life cycle pharmacovigilance, which was led by Italy. And these 5 main work areas were underpinned by 3 supporting areas. The UK led on the first 2, which was about project management, coordination and communications. And then the final work stream was regarding evaluation of the project. And up in the top right-hand side, you can see the General Advisory Board. This was made up of independent international representatives who came from the WHO, UMC, ISOP. We had Francois from EURDIS. We had the European Commission and CHAFIA and the MEA. And they worked alongside the work package leaders to support and guide and give strategic overview of the work being taken forward. We're very grateful for all the help and support that we were given. This next slide gives an overview of the timelines. At the very beginning, we can see the handshake being done back in November 2013. And then the start of the project was very much gathering information. So a series of surveys were conducted across the different work areas. And from this, we developed a series of reports and recommendations, which then led into the development of the deliverables and the training events and various communication exercises. Originally, the project was meant to last for 3 years, but they extended the project so that we could carry out some additional activities and really build on what we were developing. So this slide just goes to show the huge amount of effort that went into the project and a flavour of the fantastic collaboration that was there. And the time dedicated, you can see that there was over 9,000 working days by the work partners, and we produced 75 deliverables. So of these 75 deliverables, you can see that they were grouped into these themes, and there's a variety of different outputs that were developed. And I'll talk a little bit about some of them for the different work packages at a high level, just to give you a feel for what's available. So this slide, I know some of you may have seen, but it started becoming internally known within the project as the pyramid of deliverables, where quality management system is kind of underpinning all of the other activities. And then we had adverse drug reaction reporting, signal management with life cycle kind of overseeing up at the top. And then integral to it all, of course, is risk communication. So starting off with quality management systems, we set out to increase existing knowledge of quality management systems for pharmacovigilance staff within the NCAs through providing a training program. And based on the surveys and site visits and the network experience, we developed a toolkit, which was a diverse collection of case studies, good practices and templates, and a guidance for NCAs to aid their understanding of quality management and the establishment and operation of their pharmacovigilance quality systems. So that was the primary thing that was developed, and we also had 4 e-learning modules, and again, these are available for you to look at. We had training sessions for pharmacovigilance staff and pharmacovigilance inspectors within the NCAs. And because quality management is integral to some of the other work areas, as I mentioned, we did co-training in some of the other work package. So the adverse drug reaction collection work package focused on national schemes for spontaneous reporting of ADRs, and it aimed to provide a full understanding of best practice and systems for collecting ADRs. And again, this was based on the surveys that had been carried out across the network. There was a long list of tools developed, but in particular, I'll mention the e-learning on additional monitoring, on duplicate detection, and a telephone reporting and how to handle them. But again, here I wasn't intending to go into the detail of what each work package had delivered, because you'll be able to look and see. But one particular highlight was the European-wide ADR social media campaign. we had 21 NCAs taking part in a week-long campaign last November. And during that week, we saw a 13% increase in reporting. And 88% of those that took part would support having another campaign. I won't go through all these statistics here, but you know, the first one you can see that we managed to reach over 2.5 million people, which is pretty impressive. And I'm really pleased that the Heads of Medicines Agency's Communications Working Group are currently working on doing a second campaign this November, and they'll be using some of the scope materials to support this. And there's hope that this may become an annual or even a more global event. So the WHO had an article regarding the campaign in their April edition of the Uppsala reports, and you may have already seen it, but some of you might be interested in having a look at it. One of the key features of the ADR campaign was a short animation that we developed, and we tailored it and translated it into 24 versions so that it had the specific NCA details for people to know where to report to. And it had simple key messages for the ADR life cycle, which were broken down into short clips and used throughout the week of the campaign. And it was supported by some infographics, which I've got a couple of examples of here. I was pleased to tell you that we've been shortlisted for 2 prestigious public relations awards for these campaigns. One of them being UK specific and another one a European-wide PR organisation. So watch this space. Some of the NCAs didn't actually have a web form, so through Scope we developed a web form that countries could adapt. And it accepts reports from patients and healthcare professionals and receives the reports directly into the NCA database and the EMEA. And if the country didn't have an NCA database of their own, then the form can act as a database. And we were really pleased that Romania adopted the form, and they also used some of the animation and promotional campaign work to help them launch the use of the form. And at the bottom left-hand corner, you can see the front page of their website advertising where to report. Another thing that we're really pleased the development of was an e-learning on adverse drug reaction reporting makes medicine safer. And some of you may have already seen this, and indeed some of you may have already completed it. But we were pleased that this received accreditation from the European Union of Medical Specialists. And so on completion of the course, healthcare professionals can get a certificate for their continuing professional development or their continuing medical education and proof of their credits. And that's an incentive for people to keep going back and using the e-learning. Through Scope, again, there's been an opportunity for the NCAs to have this translated into their own country's languages. Moving on to signal management, we used the survey results to develop a comprehensive guide to signal management and an accompanying e-learning module. We also held training sessions for the member state pharmacovigilance staff, and there was a literature review produced and the survey results available. And the survey results really helped identify areas for clarification and focus on where the training was needing to be held. So for risk communication, information collection and communication practice in the EU network was gathered to understand the channels and tools used in member states and to assess the effectiveness of the different risk communication methods. And from this, a series of recommendations were produced. Research was also carried out on the knowledge, attitudes, and preferences of the target audiences towards the different tools to assess effectiveness of the different risk communication methods. And a workshop was held in June 16 where it brought together communication experts, the WHO, EMEA, academics, patients, consumers, and healthcare professionals. And a report from this workshop is available. At the bottom here, these are various different packages that you can see. There's a proposals for improvements for the NCAs to adapt and tailor to suit their organisation. There's a guidance on web-based safety information, how to present it. And then there's the survey reports. Work Package 6 have also been developing some publications in relation to risk communication. And the first of these was published in Drug Safety in May. And the aim of this study was to assess the current National Competent Authority safety communication practices and investigate GP awareness of preferences for the safety communications. So again, that's available for anyone that's interested in reading it. The life cycle pharmacovigilance area explored existing standards for pharmacovigilance assessments and produced reports on best practice. The aim of this was to ensure that NCAs are able to support PRAC with high-quality assessments and advice on RMPs, PAS, PSURs, and referral procedures. And again, some good e-learning modules have been developed to help support those in the assessment area. And there was some dedicated training for pharmacovigilance staff last September. Another piece coming from Work Package 8 was it was thought to be a valuable tool to have an exchange program for pharmacovigilance assessors. It would help promote close collaboration and exchange of information and harmonise effective standards for pharmacovigilance procedures and assessments. And so a concept paper was developed. But when the joint action was given an extension, we had the opportunity to actually run a pilot exchange. So we set up a small working group to look at the logistics and plan the programme. And then in the early part of this year, Norway, Spain, and Portugal were able to go to the different countries and kind of very much learn on the job and shadow. And the feedback from this had been excellent, and it really was a fantastic opportunity for the staff involved. So I've mentioned some of the specific training sessions that were held, but we also last November held a flagship event, and this was primarily for the member states to make them aware of what tools and findings had been produced from scope, the benefits to the network, and then to plan future activities to maximise these outputs. And then in March, we wanted to hold a broader stakeholder event and involve patient organisations and industry, as well as academics and the regulators. And it was a fantastic opportunity to bring everybody together under the one roof, look at some of the topics in closer detail, hear the different perspectives, and really discuss how we could go forward together to enhance and develop the pharmacovigilance network. The extension also gave us the opportunity to hold some additional local events. So there was one in Croatia and one in Hungary. And again, there were patient organisations and different stakeholders that came to these. And we also managed to do a further signal management training session in the Netherlands. One particular training opportunity that we were really pleased to be able to do was a joint pharmacovigilance training with UARDIS. So thank you, Francois, for working with us to organise it. This was, we brought together a variety, a large number of patient organisations to do some specific training on, primarily on adverse drug reaction report handling, telephone reporting. And I think everyone that went found it really helpful and was glad that they'd been able to take part. And we were really pleased to have the patient involvement to again increase the capability and capacity in the network. So I've only touched the surface of what's available, but basically on the Scope website, up at the top where the red circles just come, you can look in to see the outputs and results, and all of these materials are available there. You can also access them by going into the different work package areas and looking. At the moment, we're involved in some wrap-up activities. We've been, the evaluation report is being prepared, and we're working on the final report, which will have recommendations for further research or investment and gives an overview of the project. And another kind of very long and complex task is the project finances. We're having to go through all of the finances submitted by the NCAs and review and submit these. The Scope website is only going to be up and running for a couple of years after the joint action ends. So we agreed for the sustainability, it would be much better if the Scope deliverables were available in the EU Network Training Centre learning platform. And I'm pleased that 13 of the e-learning modules and the associated relevant guidance and documents are available there now. And the Scope materials are also being built into the pharmacovigilance training curriculum. And this is really important because it will ensure that the kind of longer life of the Scope materials, making sure that they're reviewed regularly and kept up to date and relevant, and that they're used by the NCAs. So in terms of further outreach, I've mentioned some of the Work Package 6 specific risk communication publications, but Work Package 4 are also working on a publication relating to ADR collection, and we're also preparing an overarching Scope joint action publication, which we're hoping will be in drug safety. We've also been preparing posters. We'll have one at ISOP in October. And we've been trying to raise the Scope flag at numerous meetings and conferences, and at the DIA meeting in the spring, there was a huge level of interest in what was available from all sorts of different stakeholders. And ISOP are also interested in looking to build some of the Scope materials into their pharmacovigilance training curriculum, which we're pleased at. So the materials are available for you to pick and choose, and they're there for you to use within your organisations if appropriate. We have started to share the Scope materials through the International Coalition of Medicines Regulatory Authorities. And again, this was with a view to sharing best practice and knowledge and letting people know what we have available to use. And Scope was also used in Africa to help support the WebRadar developed app for ADR collection. So that was excellent. This final slide shows all the partners, the NCAs, the collaborating partners, the General Advisory Board members, and it really highlights what a collaborative effort and a wonderful opportunity it was to collectively improve capability and capacity in the pharmacovigilance network. And just want to thank everybody that's been involved. Thank you. Happy.
Thanks very much, Louise, and thank you for being so succinct and keeping us on time. I think everyone will agree it's a tribute to all of those who've contributed to this joint action, MH3 in their coordinating role, the work package leads, but particularly as an example of network collaboration that has facilitated participation from patient groups, from health professional groups, from academia and from industry. It's had a broad, transparent progression, and I think that's to be welcomed. We all knew when the legislation was put in place that capacity building was really going to be a challenge, and the Commission had foresight in identifying that as a key challenge. And I think, Louise, you brought to the fore that Scope has done what it said on the tin, strengthening collaboration for operating, for the day-to-day operation of pharmacovigilance in Europe, and thinking about the sustainability piece and how that will translate into the EU NTC is very much welcome. So with those, thanks to the colleagues who have been involved. Any questions, reflections, comments from those who have been involved, or questions for Louise based on the presentation? David.
Thank you, Louise, and huge congratulations to you and the MHRA team who took a lead. Really, a couple of comments and a couple of questions, if I may. I was at the Stakeholder event, and I will say from an industry point of view, it was a revelation. It really was a highlight of last year's meetings. I raised at that point the practicalities and the potential for training to be shared with industry. And I'd love to follow up with the potential of actual face-to-face, some of the authors in industry who write, the medical writers, the medics who input to PSURs, to actually talk to the assessors through a training event. Can we do that, please?
Louise, you might like to comment, and then
Yes.
there might be colleagues who want to comment on the PSUR initiative as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Yeah, it was a fantastic event in spring, and we really would like to share the materials. The materials are there, and there's appetite for them to be used.
It's the face-to-face.
Yeah.
Believe me, I've got the materials. We're
Yeah.
using them. It's getting that face-to-face interaction, and if I say openly, it's mutual understanding. At the moment, we're distanced by remoteness and transfer of
Yeah.
papers.
And I think there was feedback, especially at DIA as well, that people, they're dying to know what perspective the assessors, how they're reviewing their information. So yeah, I think there'd be value in doing such a training.
And June did mention the joint training that's foreseen for PSURs. So that's the starting point, and perhaps we take that, evaluate, and then incrementally progress. But I think the point is noted.
And the rider to that is, I'd love for industry to be able to contribute, and I don't want to do this as a single company, so we have a postgraduate education course at the University of Hertfordshire, where we're aiming to run a short course of 1 day for patients to do a similar thing, but to do it to show that industry can be open and transparent. Would you be willing to support that as well?
Yeah.
I'm sure it's something we'd like to reflect on.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
absolutely.
Yeah. To reflect on, yeah. Any other questions or comments, please?
Thank you, Tom Lee, Covance. Could I ask you, you mentioned the web form for reporting ADRs. Would that web form be available for industry to use?
Again, I don't see, we'd need to look into that. I don't see it. I'm sure it could be adapted easily for people to use. Obviously, Scope wouldn't be able to fund that development for industry to be able to use it, but...
Fergus, did you have a view?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question, because from industry point of view, you have either all the gateway process if you're interacting with Udrih Vigilance or other with automated systems, or we have the web services platform which enables reporting if you don't use the gateway, and you report using the ADR forms on the web services of Udrih Vigilance.
What I was thinking was more in terms of it's, by all accounts, a user-friendly way of collecting ADR reporting, and that's something which obviously we have an interest in ensuring happens as well.
Okay, so from patients to you,
Yes,
for instance.
or from healthcare professionals as well.
Actually, can't answer that question myself. I don't know if Georgi has.
Context.
No, I'm sorry, I'm not able to. We could. I don't see any more of the technically. No, nobody in the room, but I cannot comment on that. I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll follow up with the team and come back.
Thank you very much.
So we'll collect these comments, and there'll be other opportunities and other fora to discuss some of the detailed proposals. Any other questions, please, Francois?
Yeah, I'd like to come back to this idea that emerged during SCOPE, and thanks to SCOPE, at one of the meetings, there was an excellent brainstorming from experts from national competent authorities on how to engage with patient organizations. And during this brainstorming, it was clear that one obstacle in how to engage with patient organizations is how to contact them. And in parallel, the DIA organized a conference on the role of the QPPV. And they asked us, what do we expect from the QPPV? And we turned the questions to ourselves. What do QPPV expect from patient organizations, and how to contact patients' organizations? So the idea is to brainstorm on a possible role in patient organizations, a role for a person that would be officially appointed by national authorities as the contact person for pharmacovigilance. The problem we are facing, and we need to change gear, and we have a scale problem. For example, in my country, there are 60 patient organizations accredited to work with national institutions out of a total of 2,200 patient organizations. We have to fill this gap. There is a need for all these patient organizations to have someone trained in pharmacovigilance. I see that from SCOPE there is an ADR e-learning for healthcare professionals. Maybe this could be adapted for these contact persons among patient organizations who could be the link between the QPPV in industry, between the national competent authorities, trained on the pharmacovigilance system, being the person who received the safety alerts, explaining to their members how to complete a report of an ADR, and all sorts of activities. So we will have a group of experts who will meet soon to discuss similar initiatives. Some initiatives have already taken place in some member states, and see what we could propose as an initiative to create this role among patient organizations.
Thanks very much, Francois, and that is an idea that you have been championing, and we learn from Think to the meeting in Madrid and what UPATI have done in terms of, enabling patient advocacy with training support. It's definitely something that we probably need a designated opportunity, as you suggest, to discuss. But are there any other thoughts or reflections? It's a little bit of a pity that Juan Garcia had to leave the room, because I know this is something that's very close to his heart, but I'm sure it's something we should come back to. Louise, the idea of materials that have been generated through SCOPE as an enabler for training of patient advocates.
No, absolutely, and that's the kind of thing that we're going to capture in the final report and recommendations to the Commission. To say that there's an appetite there for these, so that they don't get lost.
So it will be there.
Yes, it will be there.
And you know who to liaise with. Any other colleagues, please?
Thank you. I was just wondering if the exchange of assessors was something which would be continuing, or it was kind of a one thing? Because you mentioned a pilot, which I found very interesting, between exchanging assessors between different agencies.
Again, through SCOPE, we had the opportunity to pilot it and produce a report with recommendations and say how it's been a success. And again, that's something that will feed into our final report to say, this is something that we would like to see continue if we can support it.
It's a great opportunity, and even where there wasn't, the exchange, the project did enable assessors from national agencies to really come together with, differing experiences. And I know at PRAC we've felt the benefit of having that kind of dialogue, not least in the area that June highlighted around signal detection. Because if you think back to the establishment of the PRAC and the legislator's vision, I heard one of the heads of agencies saying lately, you operate kind of a bit of a hybrid model at PRAC, in that we're not exclusively about NAPs or CAPs, nationally authorised products or centrally authorised products. We're about reducing the differences in terms of we want consistent standards of risk minimization, irrespective of whether a product is licensed nationally or centrally. So for the purpose of public health protection, bringing assessors together to share experiences can only be applauded. So it was a great operational advancement by the scope team.